Hi, welcome back to Rice. And yes, I know, it's been a while since the last video, and I did say my next video would release soon after the last, but then I realised I had exams in June, and I needed to focus on revision and school before producing a video, which, trust me, takes up a lot of time. But exams are done now, so I'm back, and instead of just talking about the films I watched in April, now there's May and June to look at. So you're getting a 3-in-1 here guys, so be grateful please. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's look at every film I watched over these past few months, all 32 of them. To kick off the month of April, I watched 3 films in one day, just for fun you know. First I watched Godzilla King of the Monsters for the first time as part of a Godzilla marathon in preparation for Godzilla vs Kong. What I love about King of the Monsters is how it takes the concepts and ideas of Godzilla 2014 and just dials everything up to 11, with tons of new kaiju and crazy fun visuals that play with colour and the scale of the towering monsters really well. While I prefer how the kaiju in Godzilla 2014 felt more huge and intimidating due to how the cinematography grounded the camera and therefore the audience with it, this more over-the-top style works in its own way and makes up for the lack of what made its predecessor so unique. However, like with other Godzilla flicks, the human characters just don't interest me at all. Still, a really fun movie which I'd give 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next I watched the expertly crafted and animated gem, Coraline, for the first time and I was so blown away. The animation is what pulled me in completely right away, because it's just so impressive how creative and bizarre it gets whilst all being real and physical as it's stop motion animated. The creepy yet fantasizing aesthetic is so iconic and pushes the film to have a more memorable identity that sticks with audiences. But that doesn't mean the narrative is an afterthought, because it's amazing too. The concept of a seemingly perfect alternate reality of the world that slowly starts to become more like an inescapable nightmare as the film goes on is just so cool to me. I really don't have any faults to talk about in regards to this film as it's near perfection, 5 stars without a doubt. Then the first big 2021 release in this video, I watched Godzilla vs Kong and it was disappointing to say the least. I came to see a big monkey and a lizard fight each other with cool visuals, and while we kinda get that, lots of the film focuses on the boring human characters who are just so poorly written I could care less about them. Especially Millie Bobby Brown's character, every time it cut to her little side quest with her generic comedy relief friends, I just wanted to get back to seeing the literal title characters, Godzilla and Kong. At least the action was cool I guess. That being said, it's the worst action out of all the series in my opinion, meaning I don't have much reason to come back to this over 2014, King of the Monsters or Kong Skull Island. And to me, that's just very sad. Huge lost potential, 3 stars. Finally moving on from April 1st, I watched one movie this time, Don't Let Go. I have to keep some of these short for sake of time, so I'll just say that this movie is so weirdly bad. The concept of a phone that allows for communication to the past to talk to a now dead person in an attempt to prevent their murder is genius. Except somehow this movie manages to be so boring, it makes the concept seem stupid by the end, which is almost impressive in a way. 2 stars. The next day I watched this Amazon Prime movie Cellar and the Spades. I don't have much to say about this film really. It was shot quite nicely and the characters were alright, but the plot really isn't that memorable, which is why this is the shortest review yet, because I legit can't remember what happens in it past the basic plot. 3 stars. On to what I consider is a very good day. I watched Whiplash. As a drummer myself, this film was already going to be entertaining for me, but on top of that, this film is genuinely one of the best I've ever seen. The music plays a key part in the narrative and is also just great to listen to, making the film a fun watch in a way, but overall, Whiplash is far from fun. It's almost like a horror in the way that I dreaded seeing what J.K. Simmons' character would put Miles Tellers through next. The cinematography is sublime, and that final scene is pure perfection. A must see if you haven't watched it already, 5 stars. Right after Whiplash, I watched another great movie, Call Me By Your Name, a bittersweet romance movie set in the beautiful summer Italian countryside, with a great performance by Timothée Chalamet. Whilst being quite a slow burner, that's what makes it great to me. It takes the time to really cement the relationship between Elio and Oliver, so by the time the credits roll, that ending hits you hard. The only thing I'll say is that the age gap is way too big, and even though I love the film, it's obvious Elio is truly a victim even if the characters around them decide to ignore this and act like it's perfectly normal kind of relationship. Also, Armie Hammer is a weirdo and I don't like him. So yeah, 4 out of 5 stars. Concrete Cowboy is this cute Netflix movie starring Idris Elba and the underrated king of Stranger Things, Caleb McLaughlin. I didn't say that name right, did I? Oh well, I'm just gonna move on. What I like about it is how they use the real life people the plot of the movie takes inspiration from to star in the film, and it really makes it feel more personal and realistic. I like Caleb's performance and his character arc. Like I said, cute little movie, not really much to say on it. 3.5 stars. The next day I watched Bad Trip. This real hidden camera prank movie is actually surprisingly filled with heart, and it's a nice little narrative with some funny characters, making all the hijinks they get up to on their road trip across America more enjoyable, because they're part of an actual plot and not just randomly strung together. Eric Andre and Lola Rel Howery are so funny, and they do a great job selling this dysfunctional friendship. Tiffany Haddish is also really great playing the crazy criminal sister role really well. 4 stars. Now onto another kaiju movie, just like we started with. I watched Pacific Rim. I really like the way this movie does the seemingly outlandish concept of massive humanoid robots justice in live action. It means it stands out against similar movies like the Godzilla franchise because the humans can actually fight back effectively against these massive monsters. The human characters themselves are still not the most amazing, but they still feel very unique, and a couple actually have memorable personalities and moments. The set design is also a little fake and cheap looking, and really took me out of the film's world because I could tell none of it was actually real. Still better than Godzilla vs Kong, don't at me, 3.5 stars. Next I watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the first time, and I can say I'm now a big fan. I don't want to say too much right now because I really want to make a big video on the series someday, so you can get my thoughts on the movies then. I will say that The Two Towers is my favourite, and that I absolutely adore the world building across the whole series. This is now up there with the usual suspects of Harry Potter, Star Wars and Marvel as one of my favourite fantasy settings, 5 stars across the board. A Place Beyond the Pines is just so good it's almost funny. From the cinematography, the characters, and that really surprising and well done U-turn of the narrative in the middle of the film, everything just fits together so well to make this gem. The cast is really great with Bradley Cooper and Ryan Gosling as standouts, 5 out of 5 stars. Please watch this movie. Then I watched Loose, and I don't know, this movie is just really odd to me. It starts off quite interesting, but progresses into what is just a very boring and generic mystery / psychological thriller type. Just not very good, wouldn't recommend or watch again, 2 stars. Dylan O'Brien is always a win, so Love and Monsters was always going to be somewhat great, and it is, even past him as the protagonist, with a fun, imaginative, apocalyptic world. The villain role is pretty generic, but to me that's not really the focus, so I don't mind. The narrative really is about love and monsters, and that's what's great about it, with Dylan O'Brien selling the part as a young man truly in love and willing to risk his life and venture out into a world of monsters and danger to be with the girl he loves again. The effects are surprisingly really good with a good mix of practical and CG for the monsters, and the action is really cool and easy to follow, 3.5 stars. Maybe I'll push it up to a 4, 4 stars. Promising Young Woman is such a smart film with an even smarter protagonist played by Carey Mulligan, with great performances by everyone else in the cast too. I really enjoy seeing Mulligan play an intelligent lady simply punishing men who prey on vulnerable women, because let's all agree, that is very satisfying to see. And she does it in style. Her outfits and hair makeup are really creative and make her character more enjoyable and filled with personality. Also, it stars Bo Burnham, and you'll see later in this video how I feel about that man, but for now I can say at the time I really liked his character and the shocking twist he brings, 5 out of 5 stars. I love a coming of age comedy movie, and one starring Pete Davidson giving a hilarious performance as always is just even better. I enjoy the balance of comedic elements and serious, more drama-focused moments. The strong friendship at the centre of the story is what kept me invested and was what made the ending hurt even more. Great watch, 4 stars. If you watched my last video, then you'll know I love the Lego Movie and Into the Spiderverse. So it's not surprising that I love The Mitchells vs. the Machines, as it's another action animation with a fun, unique art style, with the amazing minds of Chris Miller and Phil Lord involved in some way, either directing or in this case, producing. I love the humour in this movie as it focuses on the effects of technology and uses that as the crux of its comedy without making it preachy or cringy like some others would. The action is over the top and cartoonish, which adds to the unique personality of the film. Also, as someone who thinks that Netflix 2021 so far has been pretty lacking in new quality films and shows, This shines as a great hit for them to close out April, 4.5 stars. So that's 20 films I watched in April, all of them being first time watches. Pretty good effort, I'd say. But now it's time to move on to... Starting the month out pretty decently, I watched Looks That Kill. This movie is a pretty straightforward teen romance movie, except the main character suffers from a condition that makes his face so perfect that it causes people to die if they see it. Yeah, I know, pretty weird. But it surprisingly actually works as a way to differentiate the movie from others in its genre. The ending is actually pretty sad, as the characters are likeable, so I felt emotional towards them. While it's not as strong of a quirky indie teen romance with a tragedy element as something like Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, with writing that just isn't as strong as a film like that, it's still a nice film in its own right, 3.5 stars. Tom Clancy's Without Remorse is boring. The characters are boring. It looks boring. The plot is boring. Even the action for the most part is just average and therefore, you guessed it, boring. I'll just stick on a good action movie like The Raid Redemption or John Wick over this on any occasion. 2 stars. Now on to a really good one. I watched every pretentious film bro's favourite, Pulp Fiction. Just like everyone praises this film for, it is a fun ride with lots of characters and mini narratives intertwined with each other. Filled with these tense moments and so much classic Quentin Tarantino stylized dialogue, it's hard to miss. Pulp Fiction is a very memorable movie. But, and yes there's a but, this film has been hyped up for me by literally everyone in the film community for years, but I was expecting a near perfect masterpiece that would change my perception of film forever. Or even just a really good movie that is just great because it's great. It doesn't have to change anything for me, but it just has to be really great, you know? And I didn't get that. I got a really good Tarantino film, yeah, but not this miracle of a movie that I was expecting. And yes, of course, this is not the fault of the film at all, but my expectations slightly ruined it for me. That being said, I really love this movie and would rewatch it again right now. It's just a bit overrated, especially after watching 2 more Tarantino films that I vastly prefer, which I'll get onto in a bit. 4 stars, I like this movie, I swear. Best Picture winner and just generally highly praised 2020 release, Nomadland, does live up to expectations. A very personal and realistic journey that just takes the audience along a woman's life in her van. I love the cinematography because it just evokes this sense of calm and acts as if we are just peering in on a real person's life, even if it is a fictional story. This movie really made me appreciate Chloe Zhao's skill as a director, and after watching this movie, my hype for her next film, Eternals, just went up exponentially, 5 out of 5 stars. Now for a Tarantino film I do think is a near perfect masterpiece, I watched Django Unchained. First of all, I want to preface by saying I have no idea how this movie isn't the constantly raved about Tarantino film over Pulp Fiction, because it feels like it should be. Now that is down to my opinion, yes, but it still puzzles me seeing as this movie is so good. From the completely over-the-top, unrealistic and somewhat cartoonish action that entertained me from start to finish, to the cathartic experience of seeing a slave being freed and becoming the most badass bounty hunter put to screen in years. The pairing of Jamie Foxx's Django and Christoph Waltz's Dr. King Schultz as our 2 main characters work so well together, the chemistry is just so great. They are the perfect team and the relationship is the highlight of the movie for me. Leonardo DiCaprio gives a really great, entertaining performance as a slave owner. And no, I did not think I would ever say that in my life, but here we are, my favourite Tarantino movie out of the 4 I've watched so far, 5 stars. I'm not going to spend so much time on this because I already talked about it in my last video, but the next film I watched was the masterpiece that is Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. I guess all I'll say is that it was just as amazing as always, 5 stars. And now another Tarantino film I like more than Pulp Fiction, and yes I will keep bringing that up every time I watch one of his films just to be annoying. I watched Kill Bill Volume 1. This movie is literally the definition of stylized action, and it just pushes the boundaries of that even further with every set piece. The opening is terrific, throwing us right in the action in a surprising manner, and the film only gets better from there. I was not expecting a whole anime sequence in the middle of the film, but I am far from complaining because it was so seamlessly done and felt like an actual well thought out and put together choice of aesthetic for both the narrative and the crazy cool action the animation allowed for. Every fight has a unique visual style, meaning I have distinct memories for all the action scenes throughout the film, As opposed to most action movies where all the fights just evolve into one in my mind, great movie, very excited to see how it's followed up in Volume 2, 5 stars. So that's it for May, and now on to the last month in this 3-month special. Like I said when I talked about Whiplash, I'm a drummer, so I was intrigued to watch Sound of Metal and see another highly praised film about drumming. But in actuality, the film isn't really about drumming at all, but about a drummer dealing with the fact that he's going deaf. It's a story with great character growth as Ruben, played by Riz Ahmed, grows into a very desperate character who just wants to be able to hear again, no matter the cost. The ending and final scene is a very bittersweet footnote that says so much to the audience without any sound at all. Beautiful storytelling that is the perfect representation of show not tell. The film plays with sound like this a lot to put us in Ruben's shoes, using it to show contrast between what we hear and what he doesn't. A great movie that proves how important sound is to the medium of film. 5 stars. Next, I watched Scott Pilgrim vs. the World for the second time. I want to do a video in the future once I've read the comic series and played the game, and do a big 3-way Scott Pilgrim review or something like that. So for now, all I'll say is that I love literally everything about this movie, especially on this rewatch, as I could notice the more background jokes or just things I missed last time. Overall, it's just a really fun movie, the music's great, 5 stars. We've all been affected by the coronavirus and lockdowns across the world, and Bo Burnham, just like the rest of us, was impacted by being inside for a majority of 2020. That's very clear in his latest comedy special, Inside, an expertly crafted series of original songs all created during his time being stuck inside during lockdown. First of all, the songs are all amazing, from the lyrics to the production, and it all comes together to create what feels like a visual album injected with well-written comedy. But it isn't just all laughs and happy times, because the special is full of songs that focus on the negatives of the modern world and coronavirus, and how being trapped inside affected us, and Bo specifically. I love the use of colour, and how all of the sets, or stages, I guess you could say, are just different rooms in his apartment-looking space he's in. But they all ooze with different personalities, because of the novel use of easy access props and lighting anyone could just buy from Amazon. It really adds to the concept of making a special whilst being inside a national lockdown, as it doesn't feel all too grand. What makes this all the more impressive is that Bo Burnham is credited for all crew roles, with only one other producer, a real one-man show. Next, I watched Insidious Chapter 2 and this movie sucks so bad. No, like, really bad. I was hardly paying attention by the end because the plot was moving so slowly and barely anything interesting was happening. The characters had no personality. It wasn't even scary, like, at all. So it's not as if I could just ignore the issues regarding the plot because it was scary or whatever. Please don't watch this film. It's not even so bad it's funny, it's just bad. And that's just worst. 1 star. Then I rewatched Us, an actual compelling and unique horror movie from the excellent Jordan Peele. I love the performances from all of the cast, especially Lupita Nyong'o, because most of them have to play 2 characters each. The Tethered are incredibly creepy and act as a genuinely terrifying force to go against the main family. Speaking of, I love the chemistry between the Wilson family. They feel like a real family, and the film's great humour stems from them. I do prefer Get Out to Us, but it is still a really solid film in its own right, and feels very unique in the midst of the horror genre. I think at this point it's clear I'm a massive fan of animated movies, so it's not a surprise I love Pixar movies. So I've been really excited for Luca for the past year, and it did not disappoint at all. With an amazing art style that moves away from modern Pixar's strive for photorealism, and instead has a more cartoony and Ghibli-inspired feel, this movie just pops with personality and vivid colour. It feels like a less ambitious Pixar outing, but that's for the better. This means the characters are the focus, not the visual fidelity or mind-bending concepts. It's just a solid film about 3 friends trying to win a moped. It's cute, and I really like that. Also, time for another controversial opinion, because why not? I prefer this to Soul, like a lot. Okay, that's it. 4 stars, because the emotional moments could be a bit stronger, but other than that, it's really good. Nearly at the end here, but next I watched The Babysitter, Killer Queen, a fun little Netflix horror, I guess you could call it, but it's more of a comedy movie really. I love how this movie doesn't care about realism or logic at all, which makes the basic plot and characters a little more forgivable. 2.5 stars, I could push it up to a 3. Lastly, I watched Civil War, one of my favourite MCU movies. Great action, fun writing, and finally Spider-Man's introduction into the MCU. So much good stuff comes from this movie, and it still impacts the series today. However, it's nowhere near as huge of an event as the Civil War comic, and that's a shame, but it makes sense regarding the 2016 MCU climate. 4 stars. So yeah, I watched a lot of movies, I know, and I talked about a lot of movies just now. So I hope that makes up for not uploading in like 2 months. Sorry about that. And don't worry, I promise, what I watched in July will come out in August, because I've got exams, I've got free time, it's the summer holidays even, so I've got more than enough time. Until next time then, bye guys.